Digital gramophone makes no sense.
What's up, guys? Here to do a video just with some updates on some records that I've acquired, and this goes back to last year, December of last year, right around the holidays. I decided to listen to a little bit of music. If you can hear it in the background, I don't know, whatever. Decided I'm going to do this a little bit more, so that you guys don't have to deal with the deafening silence, the crickets that follow me around in life. So we're listening to Peter Green with Nigel Watson, Hot Foot Powder. This was a prize winning from Emma at 8 Vinyl Low, her contest she held at the end of last year. I was like the second name drawn, and she was nice enough to send me this record. It's really cool. Some good blues. I love Peter Green. This also has Buddy Guy, Honey Boy Edwards, Dr. John, Otis Rush, Joe Louis Walker. It's all covers of, or a couple are kind of almost reinterpretations of Robert Johnson tunes. So that's what we're listening to. Let's get to the records that I've picked up in the past few months. So right around the holidays, I was out Christmas shopping, and my father-in-law has a farm where he keeps some cattle. It's an Angus farm, and every year we try to get him like a gift card from like a local farm supply store. And the closest one, they have several locations in our area, our metro area, but the closest one to us is about 30 minutes out in another county, so I had to make the trek out there just for that. The traffic was horrible. It's Christmas, everybody's out shopping. I just couldn't take it anymore. I had to pull off the road and just take a breather, and I happened to be close to Noble Records. So I stopped in just to say hey to Dylan, wish him a happy holiday, and then I looked around and I wasn't really there to like pick up a lot, so I just kind of perused to try and find some things that were semi-affordable. First thing I found was this very nice copy of Badfinger's No Dice. I had a copy of this already, but it was pretty beat, very noisy. This one was a huge upgrade. Of course, the influential power pop sound of early power pop sound of Badfinger, and they're the guys, gatefold, and of course it's on Apple. Then I picked up a few R&B albums. The first one being Proud Mary by Solomon Burke. I'm a big Solomon Burke fan. This came out in I can't remember when, but it's on Bell Records. It was the later 60s. I also picked up Watch Out by Martha and the Vandellas on Gordy. This is talked about from time to time, and Edwin, a pretty green vinyl guy, did a video on this topic. And I'm a sucker for 60s R&B. I grew up on it, and now I know more about it than my parents do. But so whenever I find albums like this that are in really good condition, this still has like partial shrink on it. I'm holding it up the wrong way. Um, I just pounce on them. But the thing is that with certain groups, especially from the 60s, pre-67, and this came out in 66, you know, the album as an art form was still kind of finding its way. And, you know, R&B especially was a single-driven genre. Well into the late 60s and even into the 70s. So complete albums were never really as great as if you just find like a well put together comp or something like that. So, but I still pick them up to at least just see what I think. And if it's not worth hanging on to, I'll sell it back or, you know, trade it in or something. But so I don't know. Martha and the Vandellas. That one has, what were the singles on this one? I'm Ready for Love. Jimmy Mac was the big one. Jimmy Mac was the big single on this one. I think What Am I Going to Do Without Your Love was the other one. And then the last one I picked up was James Brown, Live at the Apollo on King. Live at the Apollo Volume 2. Not to be confused with the legendary Live at the Apollo from 62. This one was 68, I believe. You know, why can't you find years on a lot of these? Anyways, James Brown and His Famous Flames. I actually prefer live James Brown over studio recorded James Brown, with the exception of a couple of albums like The Payback. But especially the 60s stuff, it's just, if it's recorded well, it's just, you can't beat it. You know, it's way better than the studio output, in my opinion. So, Christmas time rolls around, I get a gift card and usually sometimes just some cash or whatever, because people know that I want to buy records and they don't know like where to get record stores, what's record stores to get gift cards from or anything. My brother, though, lives in the Greenville, South Carolina area, and he for the last 3 or 4 years has gotten me just a gift card to Horizon Records in Greenville. You guys have probably heard Eric Weinbender talk about them, or I should say bitch about them. And he's right, they're a little bit pricey. But when I'm in there, their new records are like $1 to $2 more expensive than what I find at Lunchbox. But I've always kind of thought that Lunchbox priced their new records really well, because even Repo here in town is about the same as Horizon. So, you know, I don't know. I think, you know, Eric gets some good deals from his boy at Pharmacy, and I think he gets a little spoiled because of it. He's very fortunate, at least from what I can tell in his videos, he's very fortunate to have that guy in town. So, but anyway, Eric's gonna light me up. Gets so defensive. You know I love you, man. Anyway, so with that gift card, I picked up Purple Mountains. Finally picked up a physical copy of this album. I streamed this quite a bit. I streamed this album just as much as I streamed any of the other albums that I had physical copies of. It was definitely one of my favorite albums from the year, and if I had stretched out my top 10 video into like an official top 20 or something, this definitely would have been in there for sure. I'm a big fan of David Berman. I really feel like this album over time will grow on me. I like it. I think it's great. I maybe reserve a little bit of judgment on it because it's just so depressing, and the timing of it with his suicide, it was, I don't know, some of the songs were kind of tough to listen to, I'll be honest, because of that. But still, his amazing sense of humor is still so prevalent on this. Was just such a great artist. Terrible, terrible loss. And I finally picked up Western Stars by Bruce Springsteen. This is the music from the film. So these are the live recordings that were recorded for the film that I still have not seen, that I am so pissed that I could not get out to a theater when it was in town to go see it. You know, the life of a parent, what are you gonna do? The life of a parent with small children, there's a difference. But yeah, so anyway, these recordings are amazing. And just as good as the album itself. Some would maybe even argue better. I think Mazzy likes this more than he likes even the recorded album. All right, the next two are online orders. One of them I ordered before the end of last year. Maybe even both of them, I'm not sure, but the first one being, and I talked about this band in my last finds pickups video where I talked about Digging with Dave. Here is Witches in the Past. Now this was the one that I wanted from the get-go, because this one has the song Living in the Past. This is Witch's second album, but this one has the song Living in the Past, which I heard and inspired my whole look into picking up their records. This one I just ordered online because I couldn't find a physical copy of it anywhere in town. So ecstatic to have this. That's 3 Witch albums now. That should probably tide me over for a little while, unless Steve Carlson has a recommendation for one that I just have to have that I don't have. All right, the other one was Doves, Lost Souls. Doves was a band that I will tell you in the 2000s, this came out in 2000, in the early 2000s, I paid absolutely no attention to whatsoever. And the biggest reason why was, you know, it was the tail end of that kind of Britpop, Brit rock era. All those bands like Oasis and Blur and the Charlatans and Elastica and the Verve and God, you name them. I mean, who am I forgetting? A bunch. But you know, all of that whole era, and I still love those albums and still love those bands. But then there was kind of a shift in the tide, and a lot of bands started to come out, and they all just kind of sounded so derivative of Radiohead. And I just assumed and associated this was one of those bands. And so I never paid any attention to them. I really gave them a chance some years later. I would say probably around 2008 or 2009 even was the first time that I listened to this album. I fell in love with The Last Broadcast. That one is still on its way. There was like a delay in the shipment. How about a delayment? New word, delayment. That's called a delayed shipment. We can just all call it a delayment, okay? Trendsetter in the VC. All right, so the first new release of 2020 that I bought this year was Jeff Parker and the New Breed, A Suite for Max Brown. Now, thanks to Dave, my buddy Dave at Local Bandography, via Alex at Motoric 247, or simultaneously, give them both equal credit. I am now for the foreseeable future, a free fall into the international anthem rabbit hole. And I've looked into other albums on this label. There's a couple that I still want to pick up, a couple of the ones that Dave has recommended. But when I saw this was coming out, I jumped on it, and it is fantastic. Jeff Parker, experimental rock, mostly jazz guitarist, had spent some time in the post-rock band Tortoise. You know, I'm familiar with the albums that he was on when he was in that band. This is incredible, and I need to pick up his previous one that's simply called The New Breed. You know, one other thing that I've discovered reading into Jeff Parker some more is that he was actually on an album, a jazz album by drummer Brian Blade that I purchased back in the late 90s when I was kind of in a jazz phase while I was in college. And it's a really good album. What's it called? Brian Blade, the something fellowship. I don't know, I'll put it up down here, or a picture or something. But you know, I'd gotten into Brian Blade via, I wasn't buying a ton of modern jazz at that time, aside from, you know, some of the fusion stuff like Medeski, Martin and Wood, and the albums that they were doing with John Scofield. But I, you know, had listened to Joshua Redman and listened to a little bit of Christian McBride, and they had ties to Brian Blade, and Brian Blade played on that album by Joshua Redman. It's a pretty big one that came out in '94. But anyway, blah 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 blah. So Jeff Parker played on that Brian Blade album, and I just found that interesting because I had no idea who the guy was, and yet he was on a CD that I bought over 20 years ago. You know, that's music. It's wild. International Anthem Rabbit Hole. This guy appears on that album and has put out several records and collaborations on International Anthem, and it's the percussionist, arranger, Micaiah McCraven. And this is his album from 2018, Universal Beings. Micaiah McCraven, for those of you that aren't familiar, what he does is he gets a bunch of guys, a bunch of groups of musicians together and records like a live session, like an improvised live session. And then he will chop up those live sessions and put together entirely fresh compositions from those recorded live sessions. It's amazing. You know, this stuff expands upon that side of the record just finished. But this sound of kind of fusion jazz kind of expands upon a lot of the stuff that I was listening to like over 20 years ago. And it's kind of rejuvenated my interest. I'm really excited, and it's, you know, all thanks to the VC. You know, that's what's great about the VC. You know, the reason, and I mentioned in a video, that I really want to pare back my record collection a lot this year, over the year, and the biggest reason why is to make room for albums like this. And I think I will get much more out of those albums for the rest of my life than I will even some of the same bands that I've been buying for the last 20 years. Speaking of bands that I've been buying for the last 20 years. A couple of weeks ago, 2 albums dropped. They were highly anticipated by me. And the first one being the Drive-By Truckers, The Unraveling. And Steve Carlson already talked about this album in his Sunday show, the Sunday after this album came out. So, and he did a fabulous job talking about it. I'm not going to get as detailed. The one thing that I will say about this album is their last one, American Band, was so full of these rock and roll anthems in the vein of, you know, Bruce Springsteen's Born to Run. And that's the only difference really between that album and this one, is that it's not quite as anthemic in its sound from start to finish, but the commentary, the political commentary, is still very heavy. It's a little bit more introspective. They're pissed off, and I love it, and we need it right now, like we do. Okay, I had to flip over the record. So the next album that came out a couple weeks ago is, so far in this early part of 2020, we're only halfway through February, this is my favorite album of this year so far. It's Destroyers, Have We Met. I recently talked about Destroyer in a contest video. I can't remember which one. I showed Your Blues from 2004. This album is absolutely amazing. The production quality on it, the arrangement of... So, how do I get into Destroyer for those that don't know? He's been making albums for over 20 years. I first really got into him with Street Hawk of Seduction, but really fell in love with him with that album that I showed from 2004, Your Blues. And I've been on the Destroyer train ever since. And around 2000, now he mixes up his sound quite a bit, even though his phrasing and his lyric writing is always delivered in a similar manner, and nobody knows what the hell he's talking about. I think Mac McCaughan, who owns Merge Records, has even said, and co-owns it with Laura Balance, but says that maybe it was even Laura that said it. One of them said that they have no idea what he's talking about, and he's signed to their label. Dan Behar keeps everybody guessing. And around 2011, he put out the album Kaput, which is a masterpiece. Probably my favorite Destroyer album. And there was this heavy like saxophone on it, and it was like kind of smooth saxophone. Like it was kind of like, okay, what are we doing here? It was almost like latter era Roxy Music meets yacht rock. But it's an amazing album. He kind of kept up a little bits and pieces of that sound through his next two albums, and then the Roxy Music influence is still kind of still here on this one, but where he's had larger bands and larger ensembles of musicians with a lot of his records, this one is stripped down to 3 people. Him, the producer who plays an assortment of synths and keyboards and electronic things, and the guitarist, I forgot the name of. A lot of the guitar playing really reminds me of like David Bowie's Scary Monsters era kind of lead guitar playing. This album is really good. I mean, the way the tracks are arranged is kind of hard to explain, and maybe I can get a clip in, but it kind of... There's a full sound of things going on, and then the next thing you know, it just drops out to like this basic synth, and all you hear is Dan Behar's voice. And he recorded a lot of the vocals ahead of the sessions, and recorded them on his laptop at home, like while his family was sleeping. He's an artist. A lot of people kind of think that he's very self-serious, and with songs like The Raven, which is clearly inspired by Edgar Allan Poe, how can you not? But I have this kind of almost Andy Kaufman-esque vibe about Dan Behar. He is very funny. Has a dry sense of humor. I almost feel like at times he's just kind of fucking with us a lot, I don't know, but anyway, fantastic album. Cannot recommend this more. Dan Behar's Have We Met. Destroyers, Have We Met. While I picked up those 2 albums, I was in the used bin, and I came across Burning Building by Cloud Nothings. Now, Cloud Nothings is a band I've never talked about, but I do have 3 of their other albums. I really like them. They're the project primarily of Dylan Baldy. They have a very 90s, almost late 80s SST kind of influenced sound. Very post, like 90s post-punk kind of sound. Nirvana, very much Nirvana. A little bit of insight into my bad habits. Over the years, and at Lunchbox especially, you'll come across a lot of newer albums that have just been sold back in or returned or whatever, I don't know. And you'll find a lot of them in the used bins. And I always kind of pass on them because I say, you know what, just for $4 or $5 more, I can get a brand new copy. How stupid is that? Is that? Because this album, and probably all of those others, it's in perfect condition. I mean, you know, it's probably been played once and then returned. And I got it for like $11. I don't know. Gonna correct that moving forward. I've done it a couple of other times, but a lot of times I've always kind of been like, well, I can just get a new one for $4 or $5 more. Idiot. I'm an idiot. All right, guys. That's it. Do any of these bands sound interesting to you? Let me know in the comments. Like me, subscribe me. Let's have a conversation, guys. I'm being a bit of a smartass there, all right.